What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to Fudge Muppet. When people talk about all of the cool enemies the Elder Scrolls games contain, it is usually the Daedra or some mythical beasts such as dragons that steal the spotlight. Dragons can get a bit tiring after their 100th random appearance, and as much as you know we absolutely love the Daedra here at Fudge Muppet, there are another group of foes or friends, depending on your talents, who deserve some more love. Introducing the Undead, specifically the Reanimated, and those we theorize may be reanimated and that we'd love to talk about. The Undead have their fair share of the sensational lore the Elder Scrolls universe has to offer, and yet they are often overlooked. Today we're going to explore the lore behind many kinds of undead from all over Tamriel, and I think a perfect place to start the video is on the topic of zombies, including all traditionally reanimated subjects, husks risen by deadly disease, or those permanently trapped in a thrall-like state. Firstly, let's talk about those reanimated by spells. The moaning bags of decaying flesh we're all familiar with from playing Skyrim. The use of necromancy spells in Elder Scrolls V doesn't really do the lore justice, but various texts indicate that using the dark arts is far more complex than aim and fire. In the Elder Scrolls Online, you can find an excerpt from the text on necromancy, which explains what is referred to as the spiritual umbilicus. The easiest way I can explain this is simply the link that tethers a soul to its mortal body. The author explains that the existence of the spiritual umbilicus remaining is more likely with a newer corpse, and that it actually makes reanimation more difficult. Spirits can stay tied to bodies for days or even years, but the general rule of thumb is that the longer the mortal has been deceased, the less of a chance you have of an angry spirit trying to wrestle for control. A necromancer can still win the battle for control, however, this can be quite cruel to the spirit and also requires one to use more energy. From the sounds of it, the kind of reanimation being done in Skyrim is quite brutal in the spiritual sense. Not only is using their soul necessary, but it is being done when its link to the body is strongest. Reanimated zombies often want to be at peace, slain so they can be set free. However, that does not mean they'll act in a manner conducive to defeat. You see, one part of in-game mechanics that doesn't end up being reflected is actually the concept of intent. The intent of the necromancer when creating their zombie, including their general state of mind, is said to influence the way that the reanimated subject will act. Not enough emotion is said to lead to more of a mindless husk who can only follow very basic commands. On the other hand, if you are overflowing with emotion, you can end up creating an entity so consumed with anger and hate, its every action is perverted by its pain. A calm mind with organized plans and thoughts is meant to be the best approach. While it seems that reanimated zombies can manifest in different ways, so can any kind of zombie. One mysterious one worth mentioning is actually the zombie encountered in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Skyrim may feature the spell Dread Zombie, which can be used to reanimate a dead target, but there were no traditional zombies infesting caves and sewer systems whose life force seemed to persist eternally. These zombies, who can even be found headless at times, do not need to be brought to life with a spell by the time you encounter them. Oblivion zombies seem as if they've been decaying for a very long time, and do not appear to be under the command of any specific necromancer. They may be slow movers, but they're highly aggressive, attacking on sight, and potentially with plenty of damage they still possess the strength to unleash. They may also give you one of many diseases they can carry, with more powerful zombies carrying the more potent afflictions. Dread zombies, the strongest variant, can regenerate health, and every single one carries the disease, astral vapors, which stunts and damages your magicka and makes you weaker to magic. Perhaps that's why they emit a vaporous green glow. Astral vapors also ignores disease resistance unless you have the unofficial patch. Imagine being a mage deep in a crypt and being unable to regenerate magicka until you cure yourself. In addition to disease, every zombie out there has a 30% resistance to magic and frost, full immunity against poison, and can even breathe underwater. Thankfully, they have a 60% weakness to fire, making them more akin to undead like vampires in that regard. All of these passive bonuses make Oblivion zombies feel far less like a reanimated subject, even if they are. They can be found all over the place, but one spot you can often find them is in Ayleid ruins, which leads me to wonder if they were brought to life by some of the ancient and dark magic practices that Ayleids are so well known for. After all, the innate bonuses they possess are not shared with the corpses brought back to life in Skyrim. Potentially rogue necromancers could have also made them in special rituals with magic similar to the Dead Thrall spell and left them to guard certain areas. Another option is that these zombies are some sort of lesser Daedra, or persist due to being reanimated with a minor Daedric essence. The use of such Daedric essence being used in necromancy is mentioned by Phrastus of Ellen here in his book Unhallowed Legions as something that happens often. Interestingly, Oblivion Zombies can also be summoned through the use of conjuration magic, and such spells are not outlawed by the Mages Guild at the time, who permits no necromancy whatsoever. This could be an oversight, of course, but it could also mean that the zombies are brought into the world from a realm of Oblivion, perhaps Cold Harbor or even the Soul Cairn. The ideal masters of the Soul Cairn have promised characters such as Durnavir access to undead hordes, and I wouldn't be surprised if zombies were a part of it. Oblivion Zombie could be pulled from another realm where it was instilled with some sort of Daedric essence, and therefore bringing it into Nirn would not torment a mortal soul and would go unpunished by the Mages Guild. Another possibility is that undead hordes were provided to the Aelids back when they got involved with Daedric princes. Of course, for gameplay reasons, your summoned zombie will disappear once their time on Nirn is up, so it's not implausible that a zombie you find in a ruin is stuck in the mortal plane, in the same way that other Daedra can be. You know, like how you can encounter a flame Atronach in Skyrim, or other Daedric creature who exists on Tamriel permanently until they're slain. Unfortunately, we will never know the exact practices by which Oblivion Zombies were made. After all, necromancers aren't particularly fond of sharing their secrets in the Third Era. Another possibility is that these zombies are sustained by some sort of disease. As explained, they can carry many diseases, and they wouldn't be the only type of zombie who walks the lands due to affliction. There is a zombie like Husk created from those unfortunate enough to contract the Lotus Plague. If one catches this disease, they will gradually progress through worsening stages of fever-like pains and aches, and early on they develop an insatiable hunger. Eventually, however, they will find their appetite plummet to the point where they refuse to eat or drink anything. Their body becomes covered in open sores which cause a burning pain so intense that the subject becomes delirious and can even hallucinate. Ultimately, the disease kills its host, or at least it often does. However, sometimes the host survives and becomes transformed into what is known as a plague husk. These poor souls feature in the Elder Scrolls Online and have been described as having become mindless engines of violence, intent on destroying all life they encounter. Unlike the other zombified beings we've talked about, these zombies can deal ranged damage by vomiting vile liquid at you and will expel poisonous gas when slain. Another zombie created by somewhat natural causes can be found in Blackmarsh. It is known as a Bog Blight, and the true machinations behind its creation are not fully understood. Some people speculate that something in the water is responsible for their creation. However, the aspect that is best understood is that they come into being when a dead Argonian is not buried with a proper grave stake, or when the grave stake comes loose. It may sound a bit barbaric or gruesome, but Argonians are actually buried with a large stake impaled through their body, pinning them to the floor of the marsh. The stake acts as a more extensive version of a gravestone, in the sense that the deceased Argonian's life story is written upon it. If someone up to no good were to remove this stake, or natural forces were to loosen it over time so that it were to fall out of place, then the Argonian may rise again from the marsh as a violent, fast, and quite literally explosive, zombified lizard with a powerful sense of smell. On their own, they're not too hard to deal with, but do keep your wits about you, for they are particularly dangerous in hordes. Many people might also consider the Drago of Skyrim as a zombie of sorts. After all, they live after death, they don't have much to contribute as far as conversation goes, and all they seem to want to do is cut you to pieces for venturing into their domain. Thankfully, Skyrim provides us with enough lore so that the Drago can be understood. It's easiest to frame them as being eternal guardians. Many Drago were once Nords, serving the dragon priests during the time of the dragon cult all the way back in the Merethic era. These servants have been preserved in death with special magic, allowing them to continue their servitude forever. The Draga have been observed by those who study them to awaken at certain times and take part in special rituals where their own life force is transferred to the dragon priest they are protecting. This seems to sustain the power of the priest, and then when the Draga goes back to their resting spot, their energy recharges so they can do it all over again. You frequently wake Draga from such slumbers while playing Skyrim. However, things become less clear when you realize that not all Draga are found in locations with dragon priests at the end. Some seem to have been imbued with this state of undeath to guard other things, perhaps more powerful Draga who in life were higher ranking members of the cult, or artifacts in areas of cultural significance to the cult. Due to this inconsistency, it's no surprise that many of the now living Nord inhabitants of Skyrim mistakenly consider the Drago as being cursed to wander the depths of their dungeons aimlessly for eternity as a punishment for serving this wicked dragon cult of ages past. Before we move off the topic of zombies, I think it's worth mentioning mummified entities in this section. Mummification has been practiced by various cultures in the Elder Scrolls universe, often done as a method to best preserve a corpse, usually for honouring the fallen. It is quite common in Hammerfell and even in elsewhere. There's a mummified cat brought back to life in the Elder Scrolls Online, said to be reanimated to kill rodents indefinitely. Mummification is even seen with some Barsabic Aelids, that Aelid worshipping group which fled the Daedric venerating Aelids long ago, escaping to Blackmarsh. Mummification has been practiced in High Rock, and a version of it is even used by the Ashlanders of Morrowind. Mummies can be resurrected like other fallen corpses can by special necromantic practices or otherworldly magic interference. These beings are well preserved and can often make for strong foes when brought back to life. The text mentioned earlier on Necromancy actually states that the most useful corpses are those that are mostly intact. However, the degree of power mummification bestows as a preservation method is hard to say. Arguably, I think that much of it could be explained by the fact that a higher than average percentage of those who end up undergoing the mummification process tend to be quite powerful individuals. You are often fighting beings who were once kings, and they certainly didn't amass their power without being strong and competent. Interestingly, the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall even featured a mummy curse. The curse makes its spirit attack you every night until you finally track down the real being in its tomb and slay it. But not all reanimated subjects are covered in flesh, rotting or otherwise. Some have been stripped down to the bone or assembled from a group of collected bones found in old ruins. I'm talking about skeletons and all skeletal bone-based beings. The text we discussed, called On Necromancy, mentions the role that the freshness of the corpse plays in reanimation, saying that skeletons seem to be much more common than other undead such as zombies. She puts this down to the spiritual umbilicus concept we talked about, which involved the corpse's connection to the soul weakening over time. For this reason, we can assume that skeletons seem to be the easiest to reanimate, as their spirits don't tend to put up a fight. Perhaps this is why Phrastus of Ellen here refers to lowly skeletons as a favourite of novice necromancers. In his book we mentioned earlier, Phrastus does group skeletons into the category of the reanimated, and says they are often resurrected when a necromancer summons and instills an enslaved spirit, often that minor Daedric essence, into a corpse or construct of bodies. He mentions flesh Atronachs here too, though maybe there's a bone to pick with him about that, pun intended, in the next section. If we are to take the spiritual umbilicus concept at face value, then perhaps most skeletons are in fact powered by a minor Daedric essence, as their soul has long since departed to the afterlife. Similar to zombies, we would have to assume that skeletons who persist eternally either do so because of such a Daedric essence, or because the necromantic ritual used to create them is powerful enough to persist until the skeleton's body is disassembled through brute force. There is another source from the Elder Scrolls Online titled On Summoning Skeletons, an instructional guide on acquiring and reanimating skeletons. It mentions ghosts and spirits being more difficult to control compared to more physical undead like skeletons and zombies, which can be animated with minor Daedric spirits. If such a Daedric spirit is used, they are said to have no sense of self or memory of past lives, and are more malleable, easier to command, and capable of following simple orders. The text mentions some necromancers preferring to use zombies for tasks, though explains skeletons provide a cleaner experience as they won't be dropping bits and pieces of themselves all over one's lair. To create a skeleton, you can pull the bones from a corpse you've slain, or according to the text, even from a living victim if you have the right spell. Alternatively, you can go pillage a graveyard, as necromancers tend to do, or any ancient battlefield or old ruin. One interesting thing to note is the difference between using new and old bones. Newer bones are stronger and harder to destroy. Skeletons made from them are faster and more agile, though also slightly clumsier. Older bones, on the other hand, sound far more exciting. They often house great power, and the magic you employ will gather the scattered fragments and knit them together with necrotic bindings. They may crumble and shatter before the bones of the newly dead, but they often compensate for that liability with the extra power trapped within these relics and awaiting your command. Regardless of which bones you end up using, it is said that skeletons tend to be more sturdy and dexterous than zombies, making them noticeably faster and in many ways more dangerous. You may find this hard to believe if you've only ever encountered the very weak skeletons you can find around Skyrim, but those of us who have played Elder Scrolls for Oblivion know how tough and skilled powerful skeletons can actually be. They may suddenly perform a leaping power attack with their axe and stagger you, or simply take a step back and quickly thrust their claymore towards you, which they hold in one hand by the way, and send you flying through the air because it was technically a high skill level backwards power attack. They would sometimes even carry enchanted gear, including bows which they fired with solid accuracy, and the strongest of them all could summon another skeleton to assist them in battle. Yes, just like zombies can be summoned, so can skeletons. We also don't know exactly where they come from, but it's safe to say multiple Daedric realms could contain them. Molag Bal, for example, worked closely with the Order of the Black Worm in the Elder Scrolls Online, who was shown to use skeletons to help with labor. The Order also showed a fondness for another skeletal foe, the Bone Colossus. This massive amalgamation of bones and skulls can be encountered many times in the Elder Scrolls Online, and smaller ones can also be summoned by necromancers in the game. Molag Bal also turned Captain Blackheart into a skeleton, and he has the power to summon more skeletons when you fight him. Regardless of any Daedric prince's involvement with skeletons, we know for a fact that the Soul Cairn possesses some skeletal variants. In Skyrim's Dawnguard DLC, we can encounter warrior-type skeletons known as Wrathmen, as well as the magic-focused Mistmen, and the general minions who may wield bows or melee weapons, the Bonemen. They live in servitude to the Ideal Masters and will drop soul ashes when killed. The Ideal Masters have claimed many souls over the eras, and it is thought that the remnants of those souls trapped within black soul gems and then used for enchanting actually end up in the Soul Cairn forever. The Ideal Masters have armies of undead at their disposal, and with the right spell you can summon one of the skeletal beings mentioned to help you. I think it's safe to say that these beings specifically are endemic to the realm and have not been put together by a practicing necromancer. There is also a skeletal dragon to discuss, encountered deep within Labyrinthian during the College of Winterhold storyline. The skeletal dragon will not provide the dragonborn with a dragon's soul when slain. It also does not possess full immunity to illusion magic like living dragons do. This foe is truly classified as undead, and therefore with the Master of the Mind perk, illusion spells will work. This all leads me to believe that this skeletal dragon was created in the same way that a necromancer can create a normal skeleton. I believe a necromancer or group of them, perhaps many years ago, assembled the bones of a dead dragon or simply found a completely dead one and imbued it with some other kind of energy, be it mortal souls, some sort of Daedric essence, or both. Interestingly, the Master of the Mind perk allows illusion magic to influence Daedra as well as undead, so in that respect you could say it covers the potential of both options being true, and that goes for any undead you manipulate with illusion spells. But another skeletal dragon does exist, named Thurvelkun, and can be fought within Fanglair in the Elder Scrolls Online after he is resurrected by a Nord necromancer named Orin the Black. It goes without saying that many lesser creatures, such as bears or wolves, can also be reanimated in their skeletal form just like mortals can. Some necromancers see these creatures as preferred options, though I'd say to most, mortal beings are far more useful. It is said that such creatures are often uncontrollably disturbed by their condition. Undeath can also extend to birds. You may remember the bonehawks circling the skies around Castle Volkar and how they made for some particularly aesthetic jewelry in Skyrim. They look like regular hawks from far away, but up close you can see their exposed skull with a strange purple part, looking almost like a soul gem where you'd imagine their brain would be. There are also the Gristlewings from Elder Scrolls Online that seem to be attracted to places of death. They are skeletal in appearance and shaped more like a vulture. How all these birds were created is still not known. However, I wouldn't be surprised if many are necromantic experiments who were reanimated and then flew away and somehow continued to spread their undeath. A similar undead creature known as a bone wolf can be found on Solstheim. They are quite skeletal in appearance, kind of like a bonier skinned hound that was not sewn and nailed together, and are said to haunt old graves. The skulls seem to indicate that they may be reanimated. They call them foul beasts, not of this earth, brought into existence by black magic. Another hound I just can't help but bring up is the Deathhound. Now, these beings may not be reanimated subjects, we just don't know, but they're certainly undead, and I don't think they'll ever get a video of their own. These canine beasts with red glowing eyes and ferocious teeth can be found roaming in the wild, but are frequently seen to be used by vampires as undead companions, be it for guarding vampire lairs or simply for company. Their bite is as cold as the grave, freezing their unlucky victim's flesh and thereby immobilizing it, making it harder for them to escape or fight back. Nobody knows if this cold is tied to vampires or simply an innate quality unique to them. Similarly to vampires, Deathhounds do seem to exhibit a strong sense of bloodlust. Ecology of the Deathhound describes them as a voracious undead predator that will attack everything alive in sight. It's still unclear whether they hunt prey for sustenance or merely to satisfy some unholy bloodlust. While they do consume their prey, it is widely suggested that this comes down to their temperament and is not so much about survival. Some of the abominations we've talked about so far can sometimes blur the lines when it comes to whether a mortal soul or a Daedric soul was used, and whether or not they are undead or some kind of lesser Daedra from a realm. Well, one other area where the waters of Oblivion get murky yet again is that of flesh magic creations. Throughout the Elder Scrolls timeline, various arcane practitioners have stitched together a mass of fleshy pieces and used magic to give life to a golem-like being, a flesh Atronach. We encounter them in the Elder Scrolls Online during the Second Era, but many Elder Scrolls players would have encountered them back when they first played Oblivion's Shivering Isles DLC. Here one will meet a Dunmer named Relmina Verenum, who was plucked from Nirn and taken to the Isles by Sheogorath himself after being expelled from the Mages Guild for the extreme nature of her experiments. She believed she had discovered what she called the sixth element, or the flesh element. Within the DLC, you can find many flesh creations, both living, dead but assembled, or completely taken apart, in the ruin where Relmina conducts her study, Zarselm. The living Atronachs can be quite powerful, using a variety of agile melee attacks, as well as magic to heal or set you on fire. They have mysterious markings carved into their skin, perhaps magical seals to grant part of their power, or to magically keep the pieces of flesh from rotting. They have different pieces of armor which do not cover much of their body at all, and therefore it's likely to have a separate purpose other than protection. Perhaps they help keep the pieces of flesh joined in vulnerable areas, or maybe they somehow bind a Daedra soul to the body. You see, unlike necromancy that can involve a mortal soul, Relmina's creations seem very tied solely to the Daedra and their souls, or vestiges as they are called in the Elder Scrolls Online, and I'm guessing what Relmina does goes beyond a minor Daedric essence. Such use of Daedric essence and maybe a mortal soul is likely what's involved with the flesh Atronachs in the Elder Scrolls Online. These beings are far less complicated to make, so much so that the player is guided by a projection of Abnathan into making one simply by gathering fleshy pieces from slain Atronachs, placing them in the middle of a magic ritual circle, and then casting a spell from a ritual book. Abner remarks the process is so simple that a child of 5 could do it, and upon completion he says, "Ha, we'll make a necromancer of you yet." The magic used is also the bluey-green color that necromancy tends to be within the game, and together with Tharn's attitude and the simplicity of the process, I'd say this is more in line with the same way that necromancers create zombies or skeletons. It would make sense as to why Phrastus included them in his book in the same section, saying such reanimations are often powered by a minor Daedric essence. Such flesh Atronachs do not feature the special carvings or glowing spots that Relmina's do, they don't require any void essence or other ingredients gathered from a Daedric realm, and are generally seen to be made by less esteemed necromancers who assemble them in laboratories. These flesh Atronachs are not so fast and deal damage with heavy melee swings. They even have a torch attachment to spread fire. Interestingly, while they appear more like generic undead, they can still drop a Daedra heart and a Daedra husk. How they possess this heart I cannot say. Maybe necromancers insert it when making them in the labs. They can also be summoned by necromancers, but you'd have to assume they're being pulled from a realm such as Cold Harbor, as they're nothing like the ones from the Shivering Isles. Elder Scrolls Online also features an enemy called a Flesh Colossus, which is essentially a larger and more powerful version of the same thing. These giant monstrosities can actually deal poison damage, which lines up with a Flesh Atronach mentioned in the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. This Flesh Atronach has a poison damage aura and takes damage from holy places. You're sent to hunt it down after hearing it escaped from a Mage's Guild laboratory. Anyways, let's compare this to the flesh creations of Relmina, what she refers to as true flesh. Perhaps this is because it really is far more advanced than what Manamako and his cult were whipping up, and she's well aware of it. Flesh Atronachs in the Isles have these spots that can glow various colors depending on their power, and they all possess a unique material known as void essence. There are failed experiments in Zarselm, flesh Atronachs, which don't possess such an essence, which lead me to think it's important for bringing her creations to life. As I've said in a more detailed video all about flesh magic, maybe void essence acts like a kind of hollow cup for a Daedra's soul to be poured into or held inside while the creation is brought to life, or perhaps it's just a necessary ingredient harvested from some special place in Oblivion. After all, while the void has been associated with Sithis, it has also been used to refer to Oblivion itself at times. Speaking of unique ingredients, we can really see just how different Relmina's use of flesh magic is when she asks for your help in creating the second gatekeeper. This hulking monstrosity destroys anyone who tries to enter the realm and is extremely powerful. Check out my video on the strongest enemy in Oblivion to see if he's the winner. For Relmina's ritual, you'll need blood liqueur, osseous marrow, dermis membrane, and essence of breath. You must head to a dungeon known as the Gardens of Flesh and Bone to find them, where Relmina says she labored painstakingly for many years until her back bent and her soul became crooked, as she ultimately grew the essential components of true flesh. In the ritual, you place each ingredient into the cistern of substantiation, while Relmina yells about the beginning of the worlds and the secret sixth element. She refers to her creation as honored Daedra, and beckons it from those waters of oblivion which sire thy kind. Anyway, there's no way this is merely a minor Daedric essence being put inside some assembled pieces of flesh. It seems far more complicated than that. As mentioned, flesh Atronachs can be summoned, even in the Shivering Isles DLC. The player can actually receive this ability after rebuilding the Gatekeeper, and a faction living in the Isles known as the Zealots can also do this. They teach this sorcerer's secret to those who end up joining their ranks and proving their fealty to the Mad God. Perhaps such Atronachs are being pulled from one area in the Isles to another with conjuration magic that grabs onto the Daedra soul inside them and teleports the body along with it. A flesh Atronach is also mentioned as being illegally summoned in Daggerfall for a Fighters Guild task. I just wonder which realm that one came from. Regardless of whether we want to classify them entirely as Daedra or reanimated golems, flesh Atronachs, flesh colossi, and the Gatekeeper are all fascinating creations brought to life which certainly belong in a video alongside other reanimated corpses. One final creation worth mentioning here is actually the skinned hounds of the Shivering Isles. The true origins of the beast are unknown, however, just like Atronachs, its fleshy appearance features stitches along certain parts of the skin. There's also nails hammered into them, and Relmina has done experiments with them before, so I wouldn't be surprised if she can make them. They may have a much bonier appearance, but with their eyes glowing the color of void essence, there's a solid chance they have been formed with similar methods. And now we come to the mighty Lich. A Lich is a necromancer who has used their mastery of the dark arts to make themselves immortal. Frastus of Ellen here says that a Lich defies classification, yet refers to a Lich as a corpse that is self-reanimated by the soul it bore in life. Reanimated, self-reanimated, it doesn't matter to me. All I know is that we've got to talk about it. There is great complexity behind what helps someone become a Lich, and it is said to be a deep and well-kept secret. Liches are not limited to any specific place around Tamriel, but it makes sense to assume they are more likely to be encountered in areas where necromancy is or was more common. Many Elder Scrolls fans are familiar with the Liches one can encounter deep in Cyrodiil's Aelid ruins when playing the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. These floating, staff-wielding mockeries of mortality will kill any who intrude into their personal space. They know powerful elemental damage spells, an absorb health spell, they can summon deadly Daedra or undead, and can even cast a sturdy arcane shield upon themselves. In addition, they have a laundry list of innate buffs: full resistance to frost and poison, 25% resistance to magic, and a 25% chance to fully absorb incoming spells. They have a slight weakness to fire, as many undead do, but most adventurers are better off avoiding these beings entirely. Usually the kinds of necromancers who become liches are so obsessed with pursuing the dark arts that they will leave the outside world alone. Many simply want to continue their studies undisturbed. However, there's is no shortage of liches who have ended up causing trouble for inhabitants of Tamriel after growing powerful enough. Look no further than Manamako, who is sometimes called the first of the Undying Liches, despite this ultimately not being true. It is also known that liches can use powerful illusion magic to change their appearance. It is said that the wandering spirit of a lost child could be a starving lich in disguise. One powerful lich using illusion can be encountered in the Elder Scrolls Online. Her name is Vastari, and her illusion magic makes her appear as a regular high elf. She is a very rare example of a lich who actually tries to use her powers for a moral good in the world, though being a necromancer there are obviously a few moral concessions that have to be made from time to time. To practice necromancy to a truly deep extent often involves tormenting unconsenting mortal souls, and I think it's hard to argue against that being an immoral act. We'll never know how many liches are out there disguised as mortals who act for the greater good, but what we know for sure is that there's many bad ones. To actually achieve lichdom can require reprehensible acts. There are multiple misconceptions when it comes to pulling off such a feat, and this is no surprise, as if the secrets were so accessible, then there'd be far more liches than are currently encountered. There's also more than one way to become a lich, which can lead to contradictions, but I believe all methods explained in the lore have large elements of truth to them. One method talks about using a special spell to tear out the souls of unwilling victims, and using the absolute terror and pain from this soul-rending process to make ascension to lichdom all the more powerful and effective. As written in A Guide to Ascendancy Pathway to Lichdom, you must use a kind of casting relic along with a unique soul-tearing spell. It can be an evil-aligned relic or a good-aligned one that you have corrupted, which can be even better. The guide also states that the more powerful the relic is, the more painful the soul-tearing will be, which ultimately helps you to become a stronger lich when the process is complete. In addition to mass amounts of torment and sacrifices, the necromancer attempting to become a lich must also be of the right mind. You'll notice that this is a shared similarity when it comes to reanimating other things as discussed earlier. So to be a lich, you have to be able to force your own body into death and beyond, and this requires an immense amount of willpower and mental fortitude to even begin. Of course, you also need deep knowledge on necromantic arts themselves, so putting it all together, it's definitely not a straightforward endeavor. There's a target you're sent to kill during the Dark Brotherhood plot in Oblivion, a necromancer who is undergoing his transformation to become a lich. He's in the middle of transferring his soul into an object, also known as a phylactery. You can find his diary, which details his efforts, and in it he explains that everyone knows that becoming a lich involves remaining bound to one's soul by transferring it into a physical object. The details, however, are the challenging and secretive part. The necromancer talks about praying to his sovereign, who we can assume is Manamako, for the answers. He says the great sovereign came to him while he meditated and told him the secrets of transcendence. They were even more complex and arcane than he could ever have imagined, and he refused to write them down. His final entry talks about how he has sacrificed many innocents and used many resurrected servants to aid him during a nearly week-long ritual. He also constructed an hourglass known as the Sands of Resolve to act as his phylactery. While it isn't stated explicitly, I believe that the casting relic mentioned in the other text may also be the phylactery. Perhaps rending souls with a relic or object and a spell is the first step, and then the final step is transferring your own soul into that same relic afterwards. Either way, according to the diary in Oblivion, it turns out his final step of putting his soul into the hourglass will actually take quite some time. He keeps the hourglass in his possession as he grows more powerful each day, but he acknowledges that truly, he is most vulnerable at this time, for if the hourglass was destroyed or taken from his possession, the link between his soul and its vessel would be severed and he'd die. He said it is believed by peasants that a lich can be defeated by destroying their vessel, however, according to him, this is foolish and would do nothing, for the ascension to lichdom is already completed. However, in the Elder Scrolls Online there is a powerful lich who created his own realm of existence to act as his phylactery, in addition to multiple orbs you need to destroy to actually weaken him. This goes against what the necromancer in Oblivion wrote in his diary, so maybe he didn't have the full picture, or perhaps there's just differences between certain methods of pulling it off. Interestingly, there are also liches in the Elder Scrolls Online who seem to be turned into liches by others after they died. This goes against all the necromantic practices we talked about so far. Whatever necromantic ways were used to resurrect dead subjects and give them new life as a lich remain a mystery. Another example of a lich-like being can actually be found in Skyrim. What enemy lies deep in a ruin, not wanting to be disturbed, only to rise up and float around the place with their trusty staff while trying to kill you? Dragon priests, of course. When they were living, the dragon priests were chosen by the dragons who ruled over men to help them run society. They were given great powers in return for helping the dragons, and this included powerful items such as the iconic dragon priest masks. Such masks bestow the wearer with a number of bonuses, but the true gift these priests would be given was this very unique form of immortality. Unlike true liches who achieve their undying state through their own necromantic efforts, dragon priests are sustained by an external energy source. It's their Drago servants we talked about, who once served the priests in life, eternally serving them in death. Fighting a dragon priest is never a smart idea, unless you're incredibly gifted. Mordecai, for example, is actually claimed to be unable to be killed in Elder Scrolls Online, except by the voice of a dragon, or by a dragonborn, of course. In fact, in the Elder Scrolls Online, you can find a note from a priest of Cain that say he and other priests endeavor to keep 4 sacred fires lit to keep dragon priests sealed in their tombs. In rarer instances, dragons also had dragon priests serve them in other places such as Hammerfell, Bankarai, which is on the border between High Rock and Hammerfell, and even elsewhere. And that, ladies and gentlemen of the living world, brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching it all the way through and for sharing our passion for the content we love to make. Let me know which one of these undead scares you the most in the comments section. Social media links can be found in the description as always, along with a link to our merchandise if you want to get a sensational t-shirt and support the channel. My name is Michael, thanks again for tuning in, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.